all units proceed to your post assignments. All units proceed to your post assignments.
Well, it's a rare Saturday night version of Ask the Inspector. We usually do it on Tuesdays and Fridays. This week we couldn't because we were in Austin, and you are looking at our favorite weapons inspector wearing a gift that was, what was the word? What's the word? Bereaved? No, the word when you are something.
Bequeathed?
Yeah, bequeathed. That's what I was trying to think of. Bequeathed by our good friend Ryan Milton. That is one.
This is in gratitude to Ryan. Thank you very much. We had a really good time in Austin.
Yep, Ryan and his wife Pat were our hosts. They put forth a Herculean effort, scouting different venues for us, putting up with the cancel culture crowd. Oy vey, is that a headache? But we persevered. What was the highlight of the trip in your mind, if you had to pick one moment, Scott?
The highlight.
I'll jog your memory. We made new friends, Peter and Sonia. You remember them and their son.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's hard to pick because first of all, the hospitality shown by Ryan and Pat and his mother.
Look
Maria,
at Pat though; she looks like I'm frightening her. Does Pat look frightened?
Well,
you see how I have my arm around her, or repulsed?
Yes, you frighten everybody, Jeff. You're a dangerous man. But then we had the wonderful event in Elgin. That was a great night. And then the dinner was fantastic with Peter. I mean, it doesn't get any better than those three nights. It's hard to pick a favorite. And then of course there was our meeting with Alex Jones. So that was also interesting.
All right, we'll get to that in a second. But that's the place that Scott just mentioned in Elgin. It's called the Liberty Tree Tavern. And the owner there, Kevin Smith, is the opposite of somebody who gives in to cancel culture. He was like, bring it on, baby. And his wife or girlfriend, I'm not sure which, Jennifer, very lovely. We had a great time. Wife, okay. That was really Texas. I mean, I felt like I was in Texas when we were in Elgin. I was like, authentic. And Scott mentioned we did the Alex Jones show, and we have a photo of that. We did it. I should say Scott did it, but Ryan and I were there. And there it is. And we don't know if it was a coincidence or not, but right after that, we found out that Scott's Twitter account was once again suspended.
Well, suspended's not the word they use. I'm permanently banned, according to them. So.
Oh, okay. Well, you've been permanently banned before, and it turned out to be not so permanent. Want to make another bet?
Well, I still think I'm winning. I think you got 2 free bottles of wine out of this gig.
That's right. I think next week I'm going to consume the other one on camera. Scott obtained a bottle of Georgian wine for me in Austin. I told him on the podcast to not bring it on the plane because he'd have to check his bags just for me, and I didn't want him to do that. And a couple of local folks down there heard me say that, so they went out and bought me a bottle of Georgian wine too. And that would be Marina and Jeff. Thank you very much.
Not just any bottle of wine, though. Stalin's favorite.
Big deal. Big deal. All right. Well, that's all the. How could I forget? The other thing everybody's been asking about this is the arm wrestling match. Ryan Milton, our host, and Scott Ritter, our favorite weapons inspector, challenged each other to an arm wrestling match. And so far, some still photos have surfaced, and they're inconclusive. People are wondering who won. You can't tell from these still photos. So, because I'm a committed journalist to revealing the truth, I have some video footage which should reveal exactly who won. Should we screen that?
Sure. I'm not ashamed of the results.
All right, here we go.
1, 2, 3, go!
Oh my God, we have a technical difficulty. I'm sorry. This is embarrassing. I thought we were going to reveal it.
What, you were in charge of the film. What did you do?
I don't know. I must have hit the wrong button or something.
Oh, man, no one's going to believe. This reminds me of that scene in Rocky. When Apollo Creed and Rocky got together for their own little boxing match, and we don't know who won. I think we're just going to have to leave it at that.
All right, unless we have a whistleblower, that's always a possibility. We'll see.
Well, we're not encouraging that.
There could be a whistleblower. All right, and one other thing. I also am the recipient of a gift. Ryan gave Scott that shirt that you're wearing, and he gave me this cup because I told him that everybody thinks I drink a lot because they see me drinking wine on the podcast, but actually I don't. And I asked him to please refrain from imposing any peer pressure on me because my body doesn't react well when I drink too much. And he not only cooperated, he gave me this cup, which has, I don't know if there's a word for that. Can you see that thing in the middle? That is supposed to take up space in the cup so that you don't put too much in, and it's just a way to help temper the amount you're drinking. So for the first time ever, I'm going to be drinking wine from this 24 karat gold Greek cup. I don't know what 24 karat means. Is that
pure?
Is that what it means?
Pure gold.
All right. So let's give this a shot, and we'll see. I guess I don't have much choice. Can't fit much wine in there. It tastes just as good, though. All right, so let's get to the questions from our beloved audience. Sorry we couldn't do the show Tuesday. Couldn't really do it yesterday, so we're doing it tonight. Back to our regular schedule starting next week, right? No, there's no other schedule hiccups that we know about, Scott?
Not next week, no.
Uh-oh, something coming on the horizon. Fu from Chicago, I know you don't think the U.S. can win the Battle of Taiwan, but what if China is forced to fight on 4 different fronts simultaneously, with India at their border and with Vietnam and the Philippines in the South China Sea? Would that change the outcome?
No, because neither, India, it's a border skirmish. It's literally a border skirmish. Let's say India won, which they won't. Where are they going to go? It's high up in the Himalayas. So it's literally not an existential threat to China. Vietnam and the Philippines, I just challenge you to basically look at the populations of all nations involved, and hopefully it emerges that China has a nearly infinite amount of resources to draw upon, manpower-wise. Vietnam won the 1979 skirmish because China was attacking. The implication here is that Vietnam would initiate a offensive operation. And I can pretty much guarantee you that if the Vietnamese opted to attack China, they would suffer disproportionate casualties. Plus, there's just no reason for Vietnam to attack China. Vietnam doesn't have a navy that's capable of withstanding the Chinese navy, and the same thing with the Philippines. So, and I just have to say it's sort of a ludicrous notion that India, Vietnam and Philippines would sacrifice everything they've built up to be and the potential they have going forward to support American insanity in Taiwan. India, I wrote about this a while back, where the Indian prime minister or foreign minister was given a speech in Thailand, of all places, and in answering questions, he spoke of the fact that if India and China don't fix their border problems, there will be no, Asian Pacific century. And the specific language used by a former Chinese premier, Deng, I believe it was, who said the same thing. And so what he was doing is putting a marker on the table to the Chinese, saying, "Hey, this is foolish. If you guys want to, work with us to have a Pacific century, we have to stop this nonsense." So the Chinese picked up on it, and almost immediately, relations began to improve. So, the trajectory of India and China is not a trajectory that is that's leading towards conflict. It's leading towards conflict resolution. And remember, the Chinese sort of have got a master's degree in that. And I'd say PhD in conflict resolution. They're the ones, after all, they got the Saudis and the Iranians to come together to end 4 decades of American brokered chaos in the Middle East. I don't see the Chinese allowing the situation on the border with India to spin out of control. And I don't see the Indians doing that as well. If the lesson of Ukraine, for anybody, the lesson is that war is destructive and expensive. So you have both India and China, which are posturing themselves to be economic powerhouses, and what they're supposed to throw it all away so that India can appease America. I think the Indians have sort of grown up and understand what America is and what America isn't. America is a dealer of death and destruction. America isn't your friend. So I don't see India doing that. I don't see the Vietnamese doing that either. And nor do I see the Filipinos doing that. So I just think it's a question that so far deviates from reality as to not really be realistic. China would crush the United States if the United States sought to come to the military assistance of Taiwan in any future conflict. But here's the other thing: China ain't going to do that. While we're speaking, people say, "Well, Scott, you used to scream and cry about all." Yep, you're right, I did. I mean, if you had interviewed me back in September, October, I would have told you that I'm very worried about a conflict, especially after Nancy Pelosi's lunatic trip to Taiwan. And I was predicting that there could be conflict, and I believe there would have been a conflict. We could have even been at war right now, except something amazing happened. There was an election in Taiwan where the current incumbent Taiwanese president overplayed her hand. She thought she was on a roll. She said, she's going to take an election that wasn't national. It was local elections, basically dealing with municipalities, mayors, things of this nature, where the number one policy issue is potholes in the streets and things like that. And she said, no, we're going to turn this into a referendum on trans-straight policy, building up on all the hype she had gotten from Nancy Pelosi's trip. And the opposition party, the Kuomintang party, trounced her, crushed her. It was clear that the Taiwanese people were not behind this insanity. And now, while this is happening, while you have Kevin McCarthy speaking about, hey, maybe I'm going to make a trip to Taiwan too. Normally, I would have said that could be the trigger. But as we speak, the head of the former leader of Taiwan, a Kuomintang person's in China right now, meeting with senior Chinese officials, where they're talking about the future, where they're talking about, how to cooperate. That's the future right there. Again, China taking the lead in diplomacy, seeking peaceful conflict resolution, avoidance, unlike the United States, who only knows one thing: war, war, war. That's not China's game. And so I just think that right now the West is, flexing in front of a mirror and no one's looking, because no one cares, because there's no flex there. The Chinese are out playing the we're going to dominate the world economically game. And the one way you guarantee that outcome is not to play the game the United States wants you to play. China doesn't want war. China doesn't need war. China's not going to go to war.
Unfortunately, I know the feeling of flexing in front of a mirror and getting absolutely no reaction. In fact, the mirror has nothing to do with it. I get no reaction wherever I flex. George from Philadelphia. I've been reading some of Putin's speeches from the past year, and I'm finding the connection between his objections to NATO expansion and the Russian intervention in the Donbass a little unclear. Was pacifying the Donbass necessary before Ukraine could hope to join NATO?
You're asking the wrong question, George. Because, yes, while pacifying the Donbass was necessary before Ukraine could become a NATO member, de jure, de facto, Ukraine was a NATO member. You see, since 2015, the United States and NATO have been training the Ukrainian forces, taking a military that was around 10,000 and enlarging it to over 250,000. These people were trained to NATO standards, equipped to NATO standards, and focused on one thing and one thing only, which was going to war against the ethnic Russians of eastern Ukraine and Russia itself in order to liberate Crimea and in the Donbass. So I don't know where you've been from 2014 to 2022. You might want to reflect on what Petro Poroshenko said in 2014, where he said that that the children of Ukraine will be going to kindergarten, walking in the park, having a great life, while the children of the Donbass will be cowering in basements because he's going to shell them. Geez, that doesn't sound like Putin's just making stuff up now, does it? How about the Minsk Accords? That ceasefire agreement that the Ukrainians begged for, the one where France and Germany came in and convinced Vladimir Putin not to kill 15,000 Ukrainian soldiers who were surrounded in the Donbass. And Putin said, "Okay, I choose peace." And for 8 years, he kept saying, "When are we going to ratify this? When are we going to bring this thing to fruition?" Only to turn out that, again, Petro Poroshenko, who should go down in history as one of the vilest war criminals of the modern age. I certainly hope at some point in time there is justice for this man. And he said, no, it was just a sham. We never wanted peace. We only wanted to buy time so that NATO, here we go again, could train the Ukrainian army one more time to kill Russians. And who joined them? Angela Merkel, the German chancellor, and Francois Hollande, the French president at the time. And they both said, yeah, it was a sham. We're just buying time. Buying time for what? War. Who was the only party pursuing peace? Putin, Russia. I know it's tough to swallow. It's all. You probably also forgot that the Russians put 2 draft treaties on the table, December 17, 2021, one to NATO, one to the United States, and the Russians begged them, just read it. They said, just read it and then sit with us and talk. And if you do that, none of this has to happen. We ignored it. We pushed it aside. We said, nah, we're not playing that game. So the conflict began. What was the first month of the conflict? The popular narrative in the West is, Putin made a stab at Kiev but failed. The Russians ran in and got slaughtered. I don't know. Gosh. They called it a special military operation for a reason, because their game wasn't to occupy Kiev. Their game wasn't to steamroll the Ukrainian army. Their goal was to get Ukraine to the negotiating table. What kind of guy does that if he's Mr. Evil? Putin wanted peace. The whole world didn't want peace, so Putin had no choice but to begin military operations, but they were special. It wasn't an invasion. If it was an invasion, this war would have been over in a week. Russia would have swamped the Ukrainians, but that's not what happened. They simply wanted the Ukrainians to go to the negotiating table, and they got them there within a week. They began negotiations in Gomel in Belarus. They had 3 rounds of negotiations there, led to a foreign ministers meeting in Turkey. And then in 1 April in Istanbul, there's supposed to be a treaty signing ceremony. Imagine that. The Russians actually accomplished what they wanted to do. All those people out there saying the Russians didn't win, they won phase 1. Why? Because they got the Ukrainians to the negotiating table. They had a finalized peace plan. Had it been signed, 400,000 Ukrainians wouldn't be dead today. Imagine that. 10 million, 20 million Ukrainians wouldn't be displaced from their homes. Gosh, $1 trillion worth of Ukrainian infrastructure wouldn't have been destroyed. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. The things that wouldn't have happened to Ukraine had they signed the peace treaty that had been negotiated because of the Russian pressure. But no, see, United States and NATO, I think like George maybe, thought that Russia was weak, thought that phase 1 wasn't a sign of Russian strength, Russian temperance, Russian restraint, but Russian weakness. And so rather than having Ukraine sign a peace treaty that would have given Russia Crimea and given the Donbass independence, they pushed for total war for Ukraine to liberate the Donbass and retake Crimea. Didn't work. Even they started pouring in tens of billions of dollars of equipment at the time. Remember this, Jeff? Game changer.
Oh, yes.
Game-changing moment. And it was. It changed the game. It turned what was a Russian-Ukrainian conflict into a Russian conflict against NATO and the collective West. And Russia, of course, had to adapt to this. It's hard because politically speaking, Russia, another reason why they went to the special military operation is that I would say there was some trepidation in Russia about going to war against Ukraine. These are brother Slavic countries. At least the Russians believe that. Maybe some people in Ukraine don't, but the Russians actually believe that the Ukrainians are their brothers, their cousins, their relatives, their fellow Slavs. They don't want to kill them. They don't want to bring harm to them. They want peace. And so, Russia couldn't go in, politically speaking, and you don't want political unrest in Russia at a time when the West is going to sanction you. And it wasn't a secret. The West said that if Russia moved into Ukraine, there would be unprecedented sanctions that were going to, remember, the ruble will be rubble. I think that's what Joe Biden said. The ruble will be rubble. Well, the ruble's looking pretty good. It's the dollar. It's not looking too good right now. The Russian economy, it's recovered. It's the European economy. It's tanking. It backfired, but it wasn't known up front that it was going to backfire. It wasn't until later in the fall of 2022 that the Russians had the confidence that their economy was okay, and they can mobilize now. They don't have to worry about popular unrest. The Russian people had woken up and said, "Yeah, we know what this war is about. It's Nazism, and it's also a war against the collective West." So they were able to successfully carry out a mobilization, partial mobilization, 300,000. And today, there we are. Russia's crushing the Ukrainians. They're winning across the board. Right now in Bakhmut, it looks like the Ukrainian army's in its death throes. And it looks like they're running out of ammunition. It's literally April Fool's. Good one, Bernie. But, so no, I think there's no disconnect between anything Putin said and that. Ray McGovern, very senior retired CIA analyst, has always said, that the best way to know what Russia's going to do is to listen to the Russian leaders, because they don't BS. They say what they mean and they mean what they say. And Putin has been saying it straight up. There's no confusion. Read it. Read his speeches. You'll understand everything.
Biden was wrong, but he was so witty to say the ruble will be rubble.
The president has a big stick. I promise you.
Hey, you know what I think might be a game changer in the realm of wardrobe is that shirt. It really matches your background beautifully. The gold and the red lettering on the book, it matches the red on the shirt. I think from now on you have to each week come up with a very festive shirt that has the right color combination. Look,
I had to let's just say that my wardrobe consultant wasn't happy with his shirt. So I think this is a one-time thing just to say, Ryan, thank you very much. But
okay. I think I get the picture. All right. I won't push that one then. Daniel from Amsterdam, the Amsterdam that's in the Netherlands, that one. Why didn't Russia react the way they did on Ukraine? Red line, yet means niet, etc. when the Baltic states entered NATO. Since they also border Russia, I would guess they pose the same threat.
There's a different time, a different era, a different president. It was Boris Yeltsin. Russia was extraordinarily weak. And there's no way that Russia could have backed up the net means net point. I mean, they made it clear to the United States. Boris Yeltsin made it clear that they weren't happy about this expansion. But there was nothing Russia could do. Russia didn't have the military that it has today. So, that's it.
All right. Why don't we check in voicemail? We have a gentleman named Mark O'Flaherty, and according to my very sensitive ears, I think this guy is either living in Ireland now or was born there. Let's hear what he has to say.
Hi, Scott. You were on Mike from Fulton TV with Ray McGovern there today, and during your conversation, you talked about ICC and Vladimir Putin and the fact that there was no legality, that the fact that Russia, the US, and several other large countries did not partake in the Rome Agreement. But you did state that the UN Charter was part of the Constitution. I'm just wondering that under that, would the family members and the veterans who suffered under the wars instigated by the Bush, the Clintons, the Obamas, and any other president that illegally did things like that, could they take action against them in a group action? Just curious to see what you think of that. And thanks for all your work you're doing.
Well, thank you for the question. It would have to be a case-by-case basis, but by and large, the U.S. government and government officials in carrying out their duties have virtual immunity for things like that. I just don't think that. I think the Supreme Court has passed a number of presidential decisions that provide immunity for government officials in the conduct of their responsibilities, unless you can demonstrate that a law has been broken. I know what you're going to say, that it was a violation of international law because the war went forward without a Chapter 7 resolution. And I agree with you, but I'll just tell you what the Bush administration would say before the Supreme Court of the United States. They would say that actually the Chapter 7 resolution that's in play was the one that was passed back in April 1991, Resolution 687, the original ceasefire resolution, and that because Iraq was never found to be compliant with its obligations under 687, that resolution kicks in, that they don't agree with other members of the Security Council like Russia, China, France, that you need a new resolution to go forward. And then the Supreme Court would say that they stay out of national security affairs, that it is the business of the government to make these determinations. And the Supreme Court would wash their hands of it. And then you have no court of jurisdiction to try these people. And I don't see the Supreme Court changing their mind now. We are never, ever, ever as a nation going to allow outside jurisdiction to be able to rule, in an enforceable manner over sovereign decisions of the United States. That's just it. If we want to try George W. Bush, we can't wait for the ICC. We have to arrest him and try him ourselves. That means that we're going to have to elect the right people in Congress to pass the appropriate laws that tell the Supreme Court that Congress has decided. This is the key. See, if Congress says we have decided that the president must do X, Y, and Z, this is what the legislation says. The Supreme Court will always rely on that legislation unless it runs afoul of the Constitution. But it doesn't. The Constitution clearly states that Congress alone has the power to declare war. So if Congress ever grew a pair, then they could do this. But Congress has punted with the War Powers Act and giving the president unlimited power to go to war for 90, 180 days. And believe me, once you go to past 180 days, there's no member of Congress that's going to defund the military because the president is, the war's lasted 200 days. No, Congress has to stand up and say, this is who we are. This is what we believe in. This is what the Constitution says. And if they do that, then you can hold a president accountable. But here's the problem. That won't be grandfathered. You see, Congress already punted. So as much as I believe that Bush committed a war crime, everybody in his administration committed a war crime, there is literally nothing anybody can do because there's no court of jurisdiction.
Would your wardrobe consultant approve of you wearing this shirt?
Let me just look over my wardrobe consultant. I'm looking for a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I didn't see it. We have a neutral stance from the wardrobe consultant, a neutral stance. It doesn't mean no, but it doesn't mean yes.
That's not going to help to sell T-shirts. You gotta fake the enthusiasm.
Wait, what? Oh, 2 thumbs up. It's a touchdown, Jeff. The wardrobe consultant says, everybody buy this shirt and wear it on Friday night.
I'll send you one now. What's your size?
That's top secret, but it would be double XL.
Double XL. All right. And
Yeah,
you can also get Scott's book autographed by the author, walked to the post office by the author as well. ScottRitterMerch.com. By the way, I'm getting messages from those of you who are saying, where the hell is the book? Are you guys pulling some kind of a scam? And the answer is yes. No, we're not pulling a scam, but we're a little behind. Sorry about that. We got your messages. We'll be getting in touch with you and you'll be getting the books.
Can I say something, Jeff?
Well, it's a little unorthodox, but okay, go ahead.
Thanks. To all the people who, I just want to set the record straight here.
This ought to be good.
Yeah, this is going to be good. I didn't want to do this for this very reason. Okay? Because it's a pain in the butt. Everybody came in and said they wanted an autographed book. And so Jeff has worked literally overtime. You have no clue how hard it was to get this up. All right. So we've done it. And now the book, the order in, I take the books, I sign the books, I fill out the paper, the stuff, I walk it to the post office, and it gets done. And I haven't missed an order yet, except for the fact that I was on the goddamn road last week. Okay? You guys have to get real here. All right? I appreciate that you bought the book, and I love to autograph it, and I love to mail it out for you, but I will not tolerate one moment people saying that we're pulling a scam on anybody, because that's where I draw the line.
It's all in good humor. Take it easy.
Well, I don't have good humor on this one. Okay? We are working overtime to make this happen, and I know Jeff's going to say, you're the world's worst public relations guy, Scott. You're alienating your base. I'm just asking my base to have some patience. I was in Texas all week, couldn't mail the books, came home, and now I got to wait for the books to come to me, because that's the other thing, guys. The books don't just grow on trees. I actually have to order them. We are out of books. All the books that I had, and I thank the people that bought the books, because a lot of people were like, oh my gosh, you got to cancel the event. You have a lot of extra books. Hey, guess what? We cleared the inventory. But now a lot of people say they want more books, and I'm happy to do it. But I have to order the books, so they have to arrive. And we're not scamming anybody. It's just the fact that this is literally a two-person show. We don't have an Amazon warehouse out there full of people that are just working 24/7 to process these orders. We'll get them out.
I didn't know this was going to be controversial, but apparently it is.
I just don't like people accusing me of scamming. That's all.
So, I'm sorry, I put a sound effect over you. Say that again.
I don't like people accusing me of running a scam. That's it. I get very sensitive about that.
All right.
I know it's their money, but we're not disrespecting them. We're doing it. We're pushing it. But just have some patience.
All right. Grogu from Belgium. Are you familiar with the Russian S-500 and S-550 air defense systems? If so, can they really shoot down ICBMs?
I mean, I'm as familiar with them as one can be, reading open source material from thousands of mile distance. The Russians say they can. I don't imagine the Russians are lying. It's like us with the SM-6 Block 2 Alpha or whatever it is. They can shoot down an ICBM, and if we can do it, they can do it. We're not better than they are. I think people need to wake up and understand that the Russians are pretty good at military technology. So yeah, S-500, S-550 can shoot down ICBMs.
Adrian from Helsinki. Turkey has ratified the Finnish bid for NATO accession. Does that mean that Russian efforts to stop NATO expansion have failed? Now, before you answer that, Scott, let's see if you want to combine these two. From Renat Nadeau, Hilton Head Island, South Carolina, possibly our new home. We'll get to that later. I'm putting peer pressure on Scott to move to a warmer climate. Does your wardrobe consultant know about that yet?
It was brought up.
Okay. Now that Finland has been ratified by all 30 member states, do you see a balance of power in the region, or just another glorification of NATO and its resolve? You want to combine those two or do it separately?
Well, let's go to the first one.
Okay.
I'd like, Adrian, what Russian efforts to stop NATO expansion are you talking about? I'm just curious. Russia has said that, sovereign states get to do sovereign things, with two exceptions, Georgia and Ukraine. That's it. They've never said that Finland couldn't join NATO. They never said Sweden couldn't join NATO. They said it would be dumber than dirt if they did. They said that there would be consequences if they did. But Russia never once said Finland can't join NATO. Never once. They never once said Sweden can't join NATO. So there is no failure of Russians' effort to stop NATO expansion. They simply said Ukraine can't be a member of NATO, ever. And they're willing to go to war with it. That dates back to 2008. And they've also said the same thing about Georgia. To anybody in the Republic of Georgia listening to me right now, the best way for you to move forward in the future is to stop tying your future to the NATO military alliance. A, you're never going to be a member, ever, never, ever. B, we're going to make you think you're going to be a member. So C, you do really stupid things that get you destroyed by Russia. Because D, we don't like you. I hope you understand that. Your future is with Russia. Just like your past has been with Russia. NATO brings you nothing. What's your common border with NATO? Turkey? How long do you think Turkey's going to be a member of NATO? Do you see the trajectory of Turkey moving towards the EU or it's to China and Russia? Big hint, it ain't towards the EU because the EU doesn't want Turkey. There we go again. Don't you understand that this is Borrell's garden? You're not in it, okay? The garden is Europe. You're outside the garden. You're the jungle. That's the reality. You will never be part of the garden, ever. So, no, Russia didn't try to stop that. Now, what are the consequences? Well, just ask the Finns. What were you spending on your defense before you joined NATO? And what are you going to have to spend on your defense after you join NATO? Do you understand that Russia is now building up a 70,000 strong new army corps in the Karelian region? Because they now, instead of having this neutral nation on their borders, they didn't have to worry about, now have an openly hostile. Oh yeah, Finland, you're openly hostile because you joined NATO that's involved in a proxy war against Russia in Ukraine, the goal of which is the strategic defeat of Russia. Do you understand what you've done, Finland? You've sided with not only lunatics, but they're losing. What kind of stupid people? This is like somebody signing a contract, a one-year contract with a football team that's in the Super Bowl in the fourth quarter, losing 56-0. All right? NATO's lost this conflict. NATO can't afford what's about to happen from a fiscal standpoint. Europe is a sinking ship. So Finland, you just bought into the losing team. And now you got some Russians on your border. And not only that, you just turned yourself into a nuclear target. Yeah, I know, Finland. You didn't want that, but it is the case now. You're a nuclear target. It's just stupid. Sweden, all that wonderful economy you had. Now, if you want to become part of NATO, how much money are you going to have to spend to take your pathetic little small military and grow it into something meaningful? The same thing with Finland. Because your military is really pathetic. You can't fight. You don't have anything, but you didn't need to. But now you want to go up against Russia. You're bragging about extending the border, NATO's border, with 810 miles worth of border. Well, you can't defend the 810 miles. You don't want a war with Russia. Look at Ukraine. That's your future if you get a war with Russia. But we can add one thing: nuclear radioactive clouds. Because they're going to nuke you. So no, this is dumber than dirt. I hope at some point in time, as NATO starts to fracture, that the Finns will reconsider and say, we don't want, and we're out. Prime Minister, they have an insane parliament. Maybe the Finnish people aren't insane. And when they start taking a look at the fiscal costs of this, it's not going to add up. Your security has not been enhanced by joining NATO. Your security has become orders of magnitude worse. So there, I think I answered those two questions.
I think you did. Let's check in with our friend, regular viewer, Jackie Le Chevalier in Argentina. Julian Assange has been nominated for the 2023 Nobel Peace Prize. Any ideas on what we, ordinary people, can do to help make it a reality? By the way, Jeff, you really need to try Argentinian red wine. You'd love it. All right, will do.
I mean, the Nobel Peace Prize selection process is an extraordinarily politicized process. I think everybody should understand that. How else would you explain Barack Obama getting the Nobel Peace Prize for doing nothing? Literally nothing. How would you explain some of the most recent, awardees? These opposition press from Russia and Ukraine. They didn't earn anything. They're not they're not a free press. They are CIA funded propaganda rags, and yet the Nobel Committee said, "Here's the Nobel Peace Prize to try and elevate their stature." Does Julian Assange deserve the Nobel Peace Prize? He's a better candidate just about anybody out there right now. How will he get it? You've got to find a way to get the ear of the Nobel Committee. Now, remember, it's Norwegian based, and Norway is the country that, according to Seymour Hersh, helped the United States blow up the Nord Stream pipelines. So it's not like Norway is inclined to go against the United States, and the Nobel Committee is not divorced from the domestic political realities of Norway. So I don't see them saying, screw the United States, we're going to give it to Julian Assange. If a sufficient number of former laureates would make it clear that that's their choice, and also make it clear that if the committee did something like gave it, for another politicized, pro-war movement, that they would return their prizes, things like that. You have to do something that says, that calls out the Nobel Peace Prize process as the sham that it has become.
So maybe it should be a broader goal instead of, focusing just on getting him that prize. Maybe the question should be how to support Julian Assange in general, which actually is the topic of Scott's most recent Substack article, Ithaca Revisited. Ithaca, not a misspelling. That's based on a poem, and it's about a film featuring Julian Assange's father. And I'm not really sure what else because I haven't seen it. But you saw it. You attended a screening, Scott?
I did. I attended as the guest of John Shipton and Gabriel Shipton, John being the father of Julian Assange and Gabriel being his brother.
And what struck me about it is that you were, I would say, pessimistic or maybe realistic, but you're not optimistic about this having happened.
Anybody who saw this film, no one's optimistic. John Shipton's not optimistic. Gabriel Shipton's not optimistic. Stella Assange is not optimistic. But that was the purpose of the reason why it's called Ithaca is it comes from a poem that basically says it's about the journey, not the destination. That the destination is nothing. And in this case, there is no destination. Julian Assange is in Belmarsh prison. He's dying. And there's nothing anybody can do to get him out. Nothing. The British judiciary, even though they've for health reasons have said they're not going to extradite him to the United States, they didn't counter the legal arguments made by the United States, meaning that if Julian Assange was healthy, he'd be extradited today to the Eastern District of Virginia, where it is basically a hanging judge court for any federal offense, and he would be found guilty in a kangaroo process, and he'd be sentenced to 175 years in a maximum security prison where they send the worst people in the world. They're going to send Julian Assange for the crime of doing what? Telling the truth, for calling out America as the war criminal nation that it is. He had the audacity to publish things that the American government didn't want you to see. Review, what the Supreme Court has said about the First Amendment and free speech, that it's the duty that free speech doesn't belong to the government. The government doesn't get to determine. It's the people that determine free speech, and it's our duty to call out the government. And Julian Assange was doing his duty, and every American should be grateful for it. It's not a shame when somebody calls out your government for the crimes that they have committed. It's a shame when you refuse to acknowledge these crimes, you try to cover them up, and you work with the government. Every American watching today should sit there and understand that Julian Assange is basically the man that's, if he goes down, you go down. They're basically saying it's a crime to exercise First Amendment. And if you're a journalist, it's all over, guys. They get him, they're coming for you. So I don't know why we should sit back there and let it happen. They keep holding these little rallies for Julian Assange, and nobody comes. Nobody comes. More people attend an NBA basketball game than show up at a Julian Assange rally. An NBA basketball game means nothing. Nothing. Zero. March Madness. Nothing. Julian Assange's First Amendment case, everything. Everything, especially if you're an American. And yet here we are doing nothing. And that was the frustrating thing about the movie, because it was actually well done, the movie. It sucked you in. You got sucked in, and these are real life characters, and you're following them, and you get the hope. You feel the hope that they feel as this case goes on, and you forget that it's history, that you're watching history, and you suddenly believe that you're in the moment. And so as they start to believe that Julian can be released, you're starting to believe that Julian can be released, and the ending comes, and you realize he's never going to be released, ever. There's no hope, none. That's why I'm pessimistic, because there is no hope for Julian Assange. He's going to die in prison.
I know it's about as sad and depressing as it gets. But the family and the filmmaker are asking people to organize screenings, and you can go to ithaca.movie. Remember to spell it ITHAKA.movie. And if you are looking for a way to be supportive, this is it. This is specifically what they're asking people to do: organize screenings. Let me play.
Just so I can say, I had a very after the movie, I went out with John Shipton, Gabriel Shipton, and Randy Credico, and had a long talk with him. And believe me, he shares what I'm saying. They're both just crushed by this case. But the one thing I told him is that I said, there's a lot of people, and I saw this when I was in you remember I went down to Washington D.C. and I did I gave a speech outside the Justice Department for Julian Assange.
Yes, one of your best.
And the feeling that I had then was that maybe the best thing would be for Julian to come to the United States, because I had faith that the U.S. judiciary would do the right thing. I mean, I don't know what I was thinking at the time. That the Supreme Court would actually find that there was no case, and that he would be he would be freed.
Well, Scott, you're not the only one who thinks that. It's a very natural thing to think, because it's not going well for him where he is.
But it's not going to happen. The only chance Julian Assange has is for the British to release him. And the reason why I bring that up is we're running out of time. The clock is running. So when John and Gabriel, and believe me, I'm not saying this because I'm going to get, John agrees with me 100% right now.
Did he say how bad Julian's, I don't know if it's invade his privacy or anything, but did they say how bad his health is? Or
well, the movie makes it clear. He's declining. He's a fragile individual. His mental health is not good. I'm not making this up. Watch the movie. It's just tragic what's happening to him. And he's dying. Right now, he is literally dying. And we have to get him out of prison, but that means out of the British prison. And he has to be released to his wife and his family. That's his only chance for survival. If Julian Assange is put on an airplane sent to the United States, he will be a dead man within a matter of weeks, if not months. He will never go to trial. Everybody's waiting for the Supreme Court to do the right thing. The Supreme Court cannot get involved until they have the trial. He will never go to trial. Do you not understand how the American system works? He will not see trial in the United States. He will be put in pretrial detention in some of the shittiest conditions ever, and they will murder him, because that's what the U.S. Bureau of Prisons does. They murder people. So anybody who thinks for a second that he's going to come here and justice will be served, he's dead man walking. So we got to get him out of prison there. That means the next time they hold something, you surround that goddamn parliament, you surround things, and you let it be known that no, he's not leaving. If they try to get him out of Belmarsh to an airplane, shut the frickin' airport down. Look at France. For God's sake, England, look at France. That's what you do when you believe in something. That's what you do when you stand for something. The British stand for not a goddamn thing. They're letting this happen, this torture of a journalist who simply told the truth. Simply told the truth. And you're going to murder him.
Let me play a portion of the trailer for the film.
Talk about your contact with Julian through his childhood. It's part of the story, I think.
It isn't part of the story.
Yeah.
The story is that, I'm attempting in my own modest way to get Julian out of the ship.
Julian Assange is the hero of our time.
He was the darling of the left.
All of a sudden, he's a puppet of Russia.
My name is John Shipton. I'm Julian Assange's father.
WikiLeaks found that Julian Assange has been arrested.
One of the most notorious and controversial figures in custody.
Assange will remain behind bars until that extradition hearing, which has been set down for the end of February.
I urge the Department of Justice to drop the charges.
The maximum jail sentence of 175 years.
Because he published the truth.
That was his wife, who's an attorney, and his father.
Yeah, but
is the son in the movie too?
Son's in the movie, Gabriel. The law doesn't matter, Jeff. The law is irrelevant. What they've done, what the British courts have done. Again, I don't want to get too much time, but the judge they put in charge in America, she would have to recuse herself because of the entanglement she has with the side that's going after Julian. His rights have been run over. The CIA spied on him while he was in the Ecuadorian thing, and they're allowing this evidence in. How the hell does that happen? The British have no justice system, none whatsoever, zero. It's a sham. It's a disgrace. England's a disgrace. I
know.
Again, I just wish the British people would grow a pair, like the French. Look over your French counterparts. You could free Julian today. Storm your goddamn parliament. Storm the prison. Do something. But to sit there and do nothing like you are, compliant little sheep, and then let this happen, you just want to wash your hands like Pontius Pilate and sacrifice this guy, send him off to America, where we will finish the job for you. We will kill him. That's what we do to people. I know. I've been in prison. I'm telling you right now, they kill people in prison.
I don't remember how long ago that was, but in that scene that we just saw where he's being dragged away, he didn't look very healthy then.
2019, I believe it was.
Is there footage of him in the film that's more recent?
Well, you're not allowed to get. I mean, you're just not allowed to film him. They don't want you to film him. So, I mean, there was a photograph that came out. I don't know the provenance of it, but it's been out around on Twitter. And if you see that photograph, you're looking at a dead man. He's dying. Like, he can't hold a conversation with his wife. That's in the movie. His brain's not working. This is a guy who is extraordinarily intelligent and articulate. And you just take a look at the things he was saying before his incarceration. He's a smart guy, and he can't speak.
Is it because they poisoned him or something like that, or drugged him, or is it because he just emotionally broken down from the experience? Do we know?
I can't speak to medication or anything like that. The movie makes it clear that he is suffering an existential crisis psychologically from being imprisoned.
Yeah,
he's in in solitary confinement. It's just there's just no words for it, to be honest. And again, this is Great Britain, the Magna Carta. Screw it, man. You stand for nothing, England, nothing, zero, squat. King Charles, you're watching it. No, you're not. But do something. Don't wait. Your prime minister's this stuck up rich kid that who's sold his soul to the United States forever. The British people need to take to the streets. That's the only way this gets done. Take to the streets, surround the prison. Don't let Julian be removed. When the police come out, you come out harder. Get your fire brigades involved. Look at France. Great video the other day where the French police charged the French firefighters, and now we know why the best people join the fire department, because they kick their ass. The cops just like to beat people. Firefighters save people. Hey, British firefighters, there's a man in Belmarsh prison right now that needs to be saved. All the British people who think you stand for anything, stand for something. Do something. But
well, the other thing that people should put pressure on Trump. He should have pardoned Julian Assange. And when Trump does these interviews, like with Sean Hannity or whomever he does an interview with, the American media people should ask him about that and turn it into a campaign issue.
But Trump has no credibility on this issue.
Well, it doesn't mean you can't make it a campaign issue. I mean,
we're waiting for 2024. Julian won't be alive in 2024.
That's a long time away, I guess, if you put it that way.
Yeah, no, we're talking now. You know, and the thought that we need an American to fix England's dirty, you know, this is all on Britain. They could have told the United States, stick it in your ear.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's no case. There's literally no case. No case against Julian.
He told the truth. That's the case. He told the truth.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Peter Hill from San Francisco. Hey, speaking of Trump, why do you take Trump's statements about ending nuclear war seriously when you know, as I do, that he's an inveterate liar? He will never do anything unless there's something in it for him and not peace on earth.
Really, Peter? That's what you're going to say? What about North Korea? Okay, Peter? What about the only president that sat down with Kim Jong-un not once, not twice, but 3 times to try and denuclearize the Korean Peninsula? How's your great Joe Biden doing right now, Peter? Because I have a funny feeling that you're a Joe Biden kind of guy. Did Joe Biden pick up the baton? Has he run with it? No. Joe Biden's actually doubled down on stupid, following the footsteps of Obama. And where are we now? The North Koreans are testing missiles. ICBMs are being launched that are nuclear capable, aimed at your goddamn city. You're the ones who are going to turn into toast, Peter. What a stupid thing to say. Yeah, look, I'm not happy with Donald Trump. He pulled out of the INF Treaty. He pulled out of JCPOA. We know his history. But he actually sat down with Kim Jong-un 3 times, and he would have had a deal that would have denuclearized North Korea, brought peace, but he was stabbed in the back by Mike Pompeo and John Bolton. Now, yeah, Trump was dumb enough to bring him into his orbit. What did he expect? But Peter, please don't sit there and say, I don't trust Trump. He did what no other president did. Sit down with Kim Jong-un. That's the kind of guy I want in the White House, the kind of guy that's willing to do that. You know, he's also the guy that said, why can't we be friends with Russia? Where are you on that one, Peter? Should we be friends with Russia? Or you put the Ukrainian flag on your social media? I don't know. That's up to you. But, you know, Trump, he's on to something. You know, when he says, a lot of people think he's just an inveterate liar, right? Trump says, I could end the war today. You know he could. Want to know how? You know how Donald Trump's going to end the war today? Pick up the phone and call Zelensky and say, there's no more aid. Done. Done. Nothing. Got to go to the peace table. Right now is the best deal you're going to get. Oh, yeah, just a second. NATO. Yeah, we're pulling out if you guys continue to send stuff. We're putting the kibosh on it. No more aid to Ukraine. We're pulling the plug on Ukraine. And since we're the big dogs in NATO, we're barking. You guys come in to heel. It's over. War's over. You know who would do that? Donald Trump would do that. There's nobody else out there right now that would do that. So, Peter, take your anti-Trump stuff and disappear. Go vote for Biden if you want to.
I would love to be able to get along with Russia.
Yeah, the other thing is, you know, it's not just...
He's not perfect. I'm not... You heard me say it. I'm angry at him on so many levels. But when we're talking about the survival of the world, he is literally the only one who's put a standard out there. There's no other candidate right now even close to doing what Donald Trump. And if you care about your future, if you care about your children and your grandchildren, understand he is literally the only one that can prevent a nuclear war right now. Because there's no other candidate. Ron DeSantis, he doesn't even know what he wants. He doesn't know which way is up and down. Joe Biden is a freaking moron who goes out and talks about chocolate chip ice cream when he should be talking about dead children. You know, who else? Tulsi Gabbard? Maybe. I have to see what she has to say. I know she spoke at the war rally. She said some nice stuff, but I don't know. Tulsi, step up to the plate. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., he said, hey, I might want to run for president. I hope you do, but I hope you can meet the Trump standard. Anybody else out there? The Trump standard. That standard is to sit down with anybody, anytime, anywhere to prevent nuclear war from happening. That's the only standard. And that arms control means we're going in. We're going to do it. Now, I know Trump fumbled. He made mistakes with the INF Treaty. He made mistakes with the JCPOA. But I think Trump's woken up to the fact that The world is insane, and it's led by an insane America that believes that somehow we're the most powerful people. He has said, rightly so, that the biggest threat to the world today is America. Find me another presidential candidate will say that. Most honest thing out there. He said that NATO sucks. Imagine that, saying that. And he said that he believes in arms control. And Peter, again, don't mean to bring you up, but he actually put his money where his mouth is. He met with Kim Jong-un 3 times to try and negotiate a deal. So right now, if you want to save the world, there's only one candidate out there that is positioned to do it, and that's Donald Trump. As bad and as odious and as, you want to hold your nose, whatever, I don't care, because in a couple years, it won't matter. You vote for somebody else, we'll all be dead. The last remaining arms control treaty expires in 2026. There is no discussion going on right now, and the Russians are fed up with the Americans who are saying that we want the strategic defeat of Russia. At the same time, we want to negotiate arms control? Do you understand the inherent inconsistencies in that position? It's insane. You have to have a president that's willing to accept reality, be realistic, be responsible, not some idiot that's blowing smoke up the American people's butt because he's trying to, hold on to some notion that America is, the supreme power in the world. Have you taken a look at the respective trajectories of where America's going and where the rest of the world is going? Taking a look at the dollar and then look at the yuan. I mean, come on, guys. We need a candidate that understands that failure to act responsibly on arms control means the end of the world. And Donald Trump right now is the only candidate who's put a position out there. Would I like somebody else to come out there and challenge him on that? Yeah. I wish every candidate went out there and said, nope, we're buying into that. We're going to do that. We're going to own that one. Now Donald Trump has to compete on other levels as well. But right now, if everybody else is going to go out and replay 2020, 2016 with the same worn out tropes, it doesn't matter, guys. Climate change doesn't matter when you're all dead. It doesn't matter. So arms control.
Nuclear holocaust is the ultimate climate change.
Well, it's the 500,000 degree suntan. Yeah.
The other thing is when people talk about, Trump would only do it if there's something in it for him. I don't see why making money is the only way to consider that. It seems to me that Trump would like to be a hero. The satisfaction of being a hero, I think, is a motivating force too. He has a big ego.
Sure. I mean, look, Donald Trump's a complicated person, just like everybody else is out there. And you don't run for president unless you're a narcissist. I hope people understand that. Anybody that throws their hat into the presidential ring is a narcissist, because it's all about them. Really is. There hardly anybody steps up there. There's a handful of people. There's one that I can think of who isn't a narcissist. And he has a great last name. But
oh my God, who could that be?
Who could that be? I think he actually believes in service, and he's proven that over and over and over and over again. There might be another person out there that also is proven about service, and I think Tulsi might be in that wagon. So there's 3 potential non-narcissists that are running, but Ron DeSantis, narcissist. Mike Pompeo, narcissist. Who's that South Carolina governor? Nikki Haley, narcissist. Donald Trump, supreme narcissist. I mean, Joe Biden, the king of narcissism. That's what people are when they run for president. So yeah, it's a big ego boost. But you know what? Let him boost his ego doing the right thing.
Right, exactly.
And I will applaud all day long if he's able to bring in an arms control agreement. I'll cheer him until he can't stand the cheering anymore.
Yeah, like you said, when he was having his song and dance there with the Rocket Man in North Korea, I mean, what are you going to say? Oh, so he could build a hotel in North Korea? Yeah, maybe, but I think it was more about being a hero.
I think he wanted the Nobel Peace Prize, to be honest. I think that's what he wanted.
Spirit Speaker Mock from Norway. Last year, Norway signed an agreement with the U.S. allowing for the establishment of 4 U.S. bases on Norwegian territory, and 3 of these are designed for aerial capacity. What prevents the U.S. from storing airborne nuclear weapons at those bases?
Norwegian government, NATO. Norway's a member of NATO, so any any modification of the existing NATO nuclear posture would require NATO to approve it, or it would require a bilateral agreement between the United States and Norway that was kept secret from the rest of NATO. Or the United States could just be dicks and do it on their own, like we've done with every other country that said they didn't want nuclear warheads. Go ask the Japanese how that worked out. No nukes. Yeah, we promised there's no nukes on that aircraft carrier. Right. But I also need to point out a couple things that Norway is right next door to Russia. You don't want to store nukes in Norway. It just doesn't make any sense. There's no reason to store nukes in Norway. And they're not going to store nukes in Norway. So I'm not worried about that. But no, I mean, the only thing that there's a lot of obstacles in the way before the United States could.
Oh my God. You talk for a minute. I'll be right back.
Okay. The world has come to an end. Jeff has just left the microphone. But no, the fact of the matter is that NATO has a nuclear umbrella. It's been challenged, by the way, by Russia. I don't know if we'll have a question on this down the road, but Belarus has just agreed to allow Russia to store nuclear weapons on Belarusian soil. Russia has trained pilots for complex. No, there are no nuclear weapons stored in Poland. Although the Poles, when the German Parliament voted to have American nuclear weapons evicted from German soil, the Poles said that they would be more than happy to take these nuclear weapons and put them on Polish soil. The Belarusians now are positioned in July of this year to have Russian nuclear weapons stored in Belarusian soil. These weapons will be dedicated to Belarus in terms of aircraft, in terms of Iskander missiles, which the Russians have already provided them, and so Belarus will be mimicking, the nuclear status of nations like Italy, the Netherlands, Turkey, and Germany, who have U.S. nuclear weapons stored on their soil, all of whom have aircraft and aircrew trained to use these weapons, and all of whom are waiting for the United States to turn these weapons over to them in a time of conflict so they can drop it on Russia.
Okay. Wine started spewing out of the bottom of that cup. I have no idea why. All over the place.
That's what the cup was designed to do, isn't it?
From the bottom? I don't understand. Yeah, it's supposed to keep me from drinking too much by putting it all over the floor. I'm looking at a puddle of wine all over the place here. I have no idea why that happened.
You asked Ryan to help you
Ryan,
your wine drinking. I think that cup's working like a charm.
What the fuck, Ryan? All right. All right. Are we ready for the next question? Did I miss anything good? No.
We're good. Okay. We're ready for the next question. Yeah.
All right. Irina from Slovenia, you said one of the reasons for the attack on Ukraine is its proximity to Moscow and the short time to respond to a nuclear attack. You also stated that Baltic states don't matter in this regard, even though the proximity. We already asked that one, didn't we?
No. This is a different question. You're right.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, this is a new question.
Okay. You also stated that Baltic states don't matter in this regard, even though the proximity is basically the same. Why doesn't their membership in NATO matter then?
Well, first of all, if we think for a second that Russia's happy with the Baltic republics being in NATO, think again. They're not happy. But when the Baltics joined back in the 1990s, there was nothing Russia could do about it. So there's that. There are no nuclear weapons stationed in the Baltics. There are no offensive strike weapons stationed in the Baltics. So there's that as well. And the Baltics are not Ukraine. There's small little republics on the Baltic Sea that have virtually zero strategic value. Russia could overwhelm them in a week, no matter what NATO puts on their soil. So it's a joke right off the bat. Russia's not losing too much sleep about the Baltic states. Ukraine, on the other hand, is a game changer. I mean, this is why Rand Corporation identified it as essential. The CIA has identified it as essential. I know the Baltic states joined in the 1990s under Bill Clinton. Boris Yeltsin opposed it. Didn't want to happen. There's nothing he could do about it. The Russian military couldn't stand up to this. One of the consequences of the Baltic states joining, though, again, talk about self-inflicted wounds, is the Russians pulled out of the Conventional Forces in Europe Treaty because, again, America and NATO are just so arrogant. So the Baltic states join, and the Russians said, well, that has to be factored into the Conventional Forces in Europe Treaty. And the Americans said, no, they weren't original signatories to the treaty. Therefore, they're not part of the treaty. And so basically what the United States wanted is Russia to continue to disarm as if there weren't 3 new NATO members right there on its borders with significant forces or potential for significant forces. So the Russians said, if that's your case, then we have no more treaty. They withdrew from it. Again, and now look at what we got. But Ukraine was totally different. Ukraine has been, highlighted from the very beginning of being strategic interest. One of the big differences between the Baltics and Ukraine is Crimea. Crimea was Ukrainian up until 2014. There's a big Russian naval base there, Sevastopol, that is of strategic significance. And so there's no way that Russia could allow Ukraine to become NATO as long as Sevastopol was there. Russia's not going to give Ukraine Sevastopol. So this was a non-starter. Then you have the whole concept of the strategic energies, the ethnic Russian population. I remind people about the speech that Putin gave to the Federal Assembly back in April 2005. It's been a speech that's been misquoted often. The one where he said that one of the greatest catastrophes of the last century was the collapse of the Soviet Union, and all the morons out there, Michael McFaul types, are saying, see, that proves that Putin wants the Russians to be the Soviet Union again. Does not. If you know anything about Vladimir Putin, you know that he does not want Russia to go back to being the Soviet Union. He wants Russia to be Russia. But it's the next part of the speech that everybody ignores, because overnight tens of millions of Russians became homeless. People who one morning had their loyalties to Moscow and et cetera, suddenly became homeless. They're Russian people in a foreign land, and many times those foreigners didn't want them there. And Putin said, my duty and responsibility is to the Russian nation, and the Russian nation is not defined by the borders of the Russian Federation, but by rather people who have common ethnicity, languages, culture, history, religion. And Ukraine has a whole bunch of people that belong to the Russian nation. So that's a big deal. Now, I know people are going to say, well, so does Latvia and Estonia and Lithuania. Yes, they do. But they're now members of NATO protected by Article 5, which is why Russia will never let Ukraine become part of NATO, because they're not going to let a nation that has, if you guys think that the hatred for ethnic Russians just happened overnight, out of nowhere, the Ukrainians just woke up and said, gosh, we just learned how to hate Russia. They've been hating Russians for a long time, especially the Western Ukrainians. And the Russians know this. So the Russians aren't going to sit there and allow something to happen where these people get empowered so they can do what they did in 2014, declare an anti-terrorist operation, ATO. Today everybody's talking about the special military operation, SMO. They don't want to, we don't want to call it that because that's Putin's talk. Well, you know what nobody in the West talks about? The ATO, anti-terrorism operation. Why? Because, gosh, you know what the Ukrainians were doing under the anti-terrorist operation? They're blowing the living shit out of civilians in the Donbass. But they weren't civilians, we were told. They were terrorists. And the West bought into that bullshit. We bought into that bullshit for 8 years, that this was an internal Ukrainian thing. They were blowing up terrorists. They were killing women and children in their own homes. So, there's a huge difference between Ukraine and the Balts. And if you don't get it, you don't get it. There's not much I can do for you on that one, but there's no comparison between the two.
Sergey from St. Petersburg. After watching the Redemption Zone documentary, I have one question. Why do Wagner people risk so much by storming buildings with small arms and RPGs instead of calling in artillery and tank and airstrikes?
Urban environment. It's you call in artillery, you call in tanks, you call in airstrikes for people that are dug in. Eventually, you're going to have to go in and dig them out. at some point in time, it doesn't matter. Now, I know you're going to say, oh, they could drop a Fab 500, a Fab 1000, a Fab 1500. You could, but at the end of the day, you need to basically put boots on the ground. The bayonets need to take buildings, and Wagner is good at that. And sometimes it's easier that way to do it. I mean, first of all, hey, pro hint, you saw the movie? I just saw it too. Are you telling me for a second all that shit blown up didn't come from artillery, airstrikes, tanks? You're trying to pretend that none of that happened already? How do you think it got to be that way? Because they blew the living crap out of it with artillery. They bombed it to shit with airplanes. They came in with tanks and did direct fire. But eventually you got to storm it with infantry. And that's what Wagner's job is. So Wagner does that. And they're very good at it. They're very successful at it. That's why right now, almost everybody recognizes that the Ukrainian army has died in Bakhmut. Who killed them? Wagner. Wagner killed them. Close quarter combat. Those storm units going in there and doing their job. Bloody business. But they did it, and they're doing it. And they're very good at it. The artillery in an urban environment, again, the Battle of Stalingrad proves that you blow up a building, all you do is make it even a harder target for people to come in. But they did that. The Russians blew the living crap out of that place with artillery, with air power, with tank fire. But at some point in time, the infantry's got to go in and take the territory, and that's the role of Wagner. Some of the most difficult fighting imaginable is urban combat.
Michael from Toronto. With all the lies Milley, Austin, Kirby, and the rest of the Biden administration have told regarding the situation on the ground in Ukraine, with reports now coming in of mass surrender of Ukrainian troops in Bakhmut and other units refusing orders, what do you expect to see in the coming weeks from the Russians?
Victory. I mean, I've said it all along. Russia's going to win this war. Russia's winning this war. And Russia will continue to win this war. And they will continue to press until either the Ukrainians surrender or they're destroyed. I mean, this war will continue. There's not going to be any let up. This is the Russians are serious. They're not playing games. I don't understand why NATO doesn't get it. This is they're all in. They're not buying into the propaganda. The Russian general staff doesn't do what I do every morning, log into my computer and get the AOL screen where I'm inundated with Newsweek and Wall Street Journal and other, pro-West things. Are just, it's the 365th day that Vladimir Putin is dying of cancer. The Russians have surrendered yet again. Russian airplanes can't fly. The Russians are out of ammunition. The Russian tanks don't work. Russian infantry are surrendering, retreating, It's all a lie. It's all a lie. The Russians are on the ground doing the job. It's a hard job. There's no doubt about it, but they're doing it and they're winning. And that might come as a shock to people who are prisoners to the crap that you're getting on mainstream media. But the Russians will just continue to do what they're doing. I do think that that there might be a window of opportunity for a negotiated settlement once the battle for Bakhmut is over. There's some people that say that upwards of 60 to 80,000 Ukrainian troops will be lost in this battle. And that's a hole that the Ukrainians can't fill. And at that point in time, people are waiting for President Xi to make a phone call to President Zelensky. And they're saying, well, why hasn't he made the call? Because the time's not right. I think the Russians told him, let us put the Ukrainians in an impossible situation. And what has Zelensky said? If Bakhmut falls, he said, I always love it, the Russians will think they're winning the war. No, they are winning the war, Zelensky. The West will lose patience with us. Yeah, because you're losing. The Ukrainian people are going to be exhausted by the war. Well, wouldn't you, Zelensky? I mean, 380,000 dead soldiers, another 380,000 wounded, 20 million displaced people. Yeah, I think they're a little exhausted by this conflict. So, that might be the time for the phone to ring and Z to say, hey, I could help you live. I could help you salvage what you can of this country. But you got to surrender right now. You got to meet every term. And that's the other thing he said. We will be forced to accept things that we wouldn't otherwise, such as Crimea, forever Russia, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, and Lugansk, forever Russia, denazification, no NATO, no EU. There's a whole bunch of conditions that are out there, but the other side is you get to, hold on to Odessa, Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkov. Those are yours. So the phone might ring. I can't guarantee it will because it hasn't rung yet. So who knows? But if the Russians, if the Ukrainians want to continue the fight, then they're going to lose everything. They're going to lose the entire Black Sea coast. They're going to lose all the territory up to the Dnieper River. That's all going to become part of Russia. It's their choice. But again, I just remind people, they wanted this war. Remember Zelensky, 2019, talking to his little inner circle. Offensive war, offensive war, offensive war. We are going to wage an offensive war. This was the guy who ran on a peace platform. But now he's talking offensive war. He wanted this. He begged NATO to train his military. NATO trained his military. This is the consequence. And again, I ask any Georgian watching this show right now, that's your fate, your fate. That's your future. If you think you can open a second front, you can't. You will all die. Your nation will be destroyed. Tbilisi will be bombed into rubble. You'll lose more cities. You'll lose more territories. Your nation will dissolve into nothing. And America and NATO won't do anything to prevent it from happening. Just like we're not doing anything to prevent what's happening to Ukraine. So Georgia, do the right thing. Stay neutral. In fact, do a better thing. Become the friend of Russia, the only nation out there that actually cares about you.
I think the most amazing thing you said is that you log into AOL every day. I didn't know they were still in business.
Have you seen my email account? AOL.com. You got mail, baby. That's look, I'm just giving away my age. I haven't transitioned over in any fancy
Do you have rabbit ears on your TV also, or have you heard about cable?
No. We got the aluminum. Actually, if you put the aluminum on the rabbit ears, it extends the range, and then if you just move it a little bit, you can sometimes get the CBS to come in like NBC. What's cable?
And talkies too. There's no more silent movies. They have talkies now.
You have volume on your TV?
Walt from Missouri. How much are American perceptions of Russia Hollywood based? Machiavelli wrote, men will not look at things as they really are, but as they wish them to be, and are ruined.
Walt, thank you for that question. And I mean that in all sincerity, because you've put your finger on one of the biggest problems we have today, which is Russophobia. Basically the fear or the hatred of Russia. It's irrational. It's not reality based. It's fear that's derived from ignorance. Americans don't know anything about Russia, plain up, straight up. We don't know its history, its culture. We grossly oversimplify anything. Ask an American to tell you about Stalin or Lenin, they'll have very shallow answers with no understanding of the nuances and the complexities of the historical realities that led to, the rise of these two historic figures and the role they played in transitioning Russia from the Tsarist era through a world war, a revolution, a civil war into the modern industrial eras. They don't know about World War II. I still think most Americans don't know the role the Soviet Union played in achieving the defeat of Nazi Germany. 27 million dead, the number of German divisions that the Soviets slaughtered, is again orders of magnitude greater than what we did. What happened in the 1990s. I don't think many Americans understand that when the Cold War ended, what happened to Russia in the 1990s and the role the United States played in that. And then what the United States has been doing ever since then, trying to carry out regime change in Russia. We're not even apologizing for it. We're not even trying to deny it. You had remember the G30, a Harvard professor, go speak at the World Economic Forum and say the sanctions is all about regime change. We want regime. You got the president of the United States saying that man's got to go about Putin. Regime change. I mean, straight up. We are ignorant about Russia. And this is why, Jeff and I are embarked on a project. Is it a good time to bring up the project, Jeff?
It's always a good time. Go for it, baby.
Good time to bring up the project. Basically, the project is what I call building bridges, or bridges of peace, and discovering your inner Van Cliburn. Now, that might not be a name that most people get, but you'll learn about it because we're going to make a documentary film about it. But Van Cliburn was a young Texan pianist back in 1958. He entered the Tchaikovsky Music Festival, traveled to the Soviet Union, and then blew the audience away with his performance of Beethoven, and walked away with the first prize. In the history of the Avenues of Heroes, in New York City, where they hold the ticker tape parades, you've seen astronauts, you've seen presidents, you've seen war heroes, you've seen everybody get that ticker tape parade. Only one musician in the history of that has ever gotten, and that was Van Cliburn, coming back from the Soviet Union. For a brief moment, he helped break down this wall, and people started to interact, and we started to talk. And then, of course, Gary Powers gets shot down, and the Bay of Pigs, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and it all builds back up. But there was a brief moment where we broke through that, and we began to view the Soviets, the Russians, as people. And so we're going to try and repeat that. And it doesn't mean that I'm Van Cliburn. No, I'm Scott Ritter. I'm challenging every American to discover your own inner Van Cliburn. What will it take for you to break down the walls of Russophobia, break through the ignorance-based fear that allows Hollywood and mainstream media to paint this grossly inaccurate picture of Russia, its leaders, and the role Russia plays in the world today? You have to empower yourself with knowledge and information. You have to have the courage to be willing to confront a mainstream narrative that's just 100% wrong. And then you have to have the convictions to move forward and try to make good with the people of Russia. They're your friends. They want to be your friends. They need to be your friends. We must have them as our friends if we're going to survive. So we all have to discover our inner Van Cliburn. We all have to work together to build bridges of peace that connect the United States with Russia. I will be going to Russia next month. My book has been, it's no secret. Komsomolskaya Pravda is publishing my book, and I'm going on a book tour. It's a book to talk about disarmament, but it's also a book to begin the process of breaking down this walls of ignorance. We hope to make a documentary film. We're going to collect some footage while we're there and turn it into a movie, and then we're going to tour around the United States and show people it's possible. And we're going to show them what it's like in Russia. We're going to show them the reaction of the Russian people to having Americans come over and talk to them. And hopefully we can start to generate, discussions where people can ask questions and then hold their elected officials accountable. And the ultimate would be on January 22nd, 2024, we can get millions of people in the streets of America. I think we're finding out that trying to replicate a million people march in New York City, because New York City might not be friendly to million people marches anymore. But it doesn't have to be. It could. It's almost better if it's a nationwide event where we get millions of people in San Francisco and Los Angeles and Detroit, in Miami, in New York City, in Washington D.C., in Boston, up and down all around. Just one day, guys. That's all I'm asking. One day, go out there and tell the elite of America that arms control is the only issue that matters in this election, because it is the only issue that matters in this election. Because if the next president doesn't embrace an arms control agenda, and in 2026, the New START treaty expires, we are embarked on an arms race that will have no constraints. And given the technological advances of these weapons, one mistake, one miscalculation, one misjudgment, you're all dead, because there is no limited nuclear warfare. I know there's some people out there that think there is. That's the other thing too. Jeff and I have been talking about what we can do going forward. Let's just say, for instance, we have a miracle and we prevent the world from being blown up. Moving forward, what do? in the United States, we have a tendency to rely on experts. For instance, let's look at arms control. There's an organization called the Arms Control Association. They're supposed to be promoting arms control. Look where we are today. Are they succeeding? The answer is no. We have institutions like Georgetown, Stanford. They're supposed to be educating the next generation of American youth to go out there and be the policymaker. Are they succeeding? The answer is no. We can't allow these institutions to be the ones that think they have the sole ability. I mean, I think one of the things they say in Georgetown is, we can make you the person in the room when it happens. Wow. So you have to have a Georgetown degree. Why let them define the room? Why let them define the people in the room? You know what? Georgetown degree ain't taking me to Russia. I'm taking me to Russia. And so I think Jeff and I, we're thinking about what we can do down the road to create our own think tanks, to do something, take the issue to the goddamn
with ordinary people. I mean, you mentioned Van Cliburn is your inspiration, but there's actually a somewhat more recent example, and that's Samantha Smith, who in the 70s, when she was around 11 years old, I can't remember exactly about that, she wrote a letter to the Soviet president and wound up visiting Russia and having an exchange with school children, and she became known as, the youngest peace ambassador ever. So we need a new version or multiple versions of her.
Yeah, I mean,
she's so famous that there's a postage stamp in her honor in Russia. They still sell this, do you know?
Well, that's a Soviet stamp, but I can guarantee you that the Russian people know who Samantha Smith is.
Yeah,
she won their hearts. But look at the date on that stamp, 1985. Mm-hmm. What date is it today? 2023. We need a new Samantha Smith. We need a new Van Cliburn. We need, and if you're waiting for someone to do it, don't do it. Do it yourself. One of the things we're going to try and do is create, some sort of framework. Communities that care. I don't know. We'll come up with some name, but it doesn't matter what the name is. What matters is what happens. People talking to people. Don't wait for your government to do the right thing. They will never do the right thing without the push. Remember, the INF Treaty was signed in 1985. But what made the INF Treaty happen was a 1 million-person demonstration in New York City in June of 1982. In 1982, there was no arms control discussion going on between the United States and the Soviet Union. It was frozen out. 1 million people went to the street and said, that's unacceptable. And by doing that, they allowed a man who had no warmth in his heart for the Soviet Union, for the Soviet people, Ronald Reagan. He called them the evil empire. He joked about firing missiles there. And they empowered him politically to do the right thing because Ronald Reagan realized that nuclear weapons were insane. Now, he watched a movie the day after, an ABC film, and he turned to his advisors and said, is that real? And they said, no, boss, that's Hollywood. The reality would be so much worse. There was no happy ending, no family reunion, everybody dies. And he said, that's insane. That's right, it is insane. And so he did the right thing, the INF Treaty. And you know what Ronald Reagan did? In June of 1988, he traveled to Moscow and he went to a university there, and the students asked him a question. They said, do you still think we're the evil empire? He said, no, I don't view you as the evil empire. I view you as friends. If Ronald Reagan can make that transformation, anybody out here watching can. Anybody in America can and should and must. Be your own Van Cliburn. Be your own Samantha Smith. Take matters into your own hand. Don't wait for the goddamn government to do the goddamn right thing, because they never will. They never will unless you push them. So again, I know it's early. June 22nd, 2024. What's everybody going to do? You're going to go out in the goddamn street for a couple hours and say, we want disarmament. And if enough Americans do that, maybe we can break free this rust, that's frozen up the arms control system, and we can get somebody into office who will say, yeah, that's my number one priority. The Trump standard that we talked about earlier. That's what we need. Maybe it won't be Trump doing it. Maybe it will. But it won't be Joe Biden, because he will never do it. It won't be anybody else in the mainstream political, say Ron DeSantis will never do this. Kamala Harris will never do this. None of these mainstream establishment people ever do that. We got to get somebody new into the White House, or somebody nonconformist like Donald Trump.
I would love to be able to get along with Russia.
All right, Ann Moss is backstage curating questions. Let's go to some live questions coming in on YouTube and Facebook. And by the way, I think I just figured out what's going on with this wine spillage. You know what today's date is?
April 1st.
That's exactly it. He played a prank on me. A very
Did he really?
Prank. Well, I don't know. What other explanation is there? All of a sudden, the wine started spewing out from either, I don't know if it was the side or the bottom, but it wasn't coming from the top.
Well, I thought the idea was if you poured too much wine in it, that it would self-cleanse.
Maybe I just didn't understand what the concept is. I just thought the idea is you don't fill it up too much.
Maybe you have to drink it soon, Jeff.
Did I misuse it?
Were they in Greek? Was it all Greek to you?
Yeah, it's all Greek to me. All right. Anyway, I'll be taking a closer look after I clean up this. Oh, my God. You should see what's going on here on my floor. All right. D. Gizzeri. The U.S. wants to start a conflict in Taiwan. China seems to want a peaceful workaround with Taiwan. Isn't it easier to cause chaos than peaceful progress? How can peace win? How, Mr. Weapons Inspector? How?
Well, peace wins when people are tired of the chaos. Look at the Middle East. For 4 decades, the United States has been in there stirring the pot, causing war, death, destruction. I had to laugh. I forget who, somebody in the State Department, maybe Ned Price, on his last day, and his spokesperson for the National Security Council, insinuated, he said, the United States has been the main driving force for peace and security in the Middle East, and that we are the ones that have brought this situation. I'm like, Ned, I mean, there's no amount of drugs that could get people to buy into what you just said. Everybody knows what the United States has done in the Middle East. There's nothing peaceful about anything we've done. We lead with the military. We bomb the crap out of everybody. We continue to want to have wars, death, and destruction. We're bombing Syria as we speak. We're provoking conflict with Iran. We're supporting the death of thousands in Yemen. And what did China do? China waltzed in, got the Saudis to sit down with the Iranians, made good. Saudis now normalize relations with Syria, made good. Peace broke out all over. Taiwan right now is taking a look at Ukraine, saying this is crap. We're not doing that. We are not doing that. Garland Nixon, it's funny. He was telling me a story. He was just sitting at home. He was eating Chinese takeout or something, and he was eating it, and he decided, what the hell? I'm just going to send out a prank tweet. And so he sent out a prank tweet that insinuated that the Chinese chip manufacturer, the Taiwanese chip manufacturing base, was a strategic asset, just like the Nord Stream pipeline was, and that Taiwan needs to be careful because the United States, because they've attacked that, will now probably attack the chip thing too, is to stir up trouble. It's just a joke tweet. Next thing you know, the Taiwanese are just freaking out. They are literally holding emergency sessions of parliament. People are asking the question. Then the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese, and they're saying the same thing. Is this America's policy? It just ran off on its own. Why? Because there's paranoia there. Because Garland touched a nerve, which is nobody trusts the United States anymore. None. There's zero trust. And so the Taiwanese are saying, we don't want this to happen. And the Chinese are saying, we don't want it to happen either. So it's not going to happen. Peace is the obvious choice for people who are given choices. The thing is, United States never gives you that choice, ever. It's our way, the highway, or we bomb the living crap out of you. The Chinese are coming in. They went into the Middle East with no military power whatsoever. None. They just sat down and said, we bring the potential for economic prosperity. Imagine that. They just want to have peaceful cooperation, economic prosperity. And it won out over war. It won in the Middle East. It's going to win in Taiwan.
I think I like Garland's prank better than Ryan's. That's just me. What else you got, Ann? Manuel Fernandez. Thanks for your donation. We certainly appreciate it. Now that everybody sees the abuses and lack of humanity the neocons have shown for the rest of the world through coups and war crimes, why is it so hard to believe that 9/11 was an inside job? Oy. Next question.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
Are you optimistic that U.S. world dominance will be over? Is it possible that they will crush smaller countries in the future if those countries join the BRICS?
Look, the United States is, not defeated. It's a strong country. But we are on a negative trajectory. And while, yeah, we have potential to go around and beat up little countries, to what end? I don't see that happening. What I see is, a big story right now is, Russia. I don't know if everybody caught it, but Russia redefined their foreign policy based upon a new set of principles that basically said, no longer is Russia subordinating itself to the notion of, the West being the center of civilization. They're saying Russia is its own center of civilization, separate from the West and equal to the West in every way, shape, and form. And that Russia is a great power and will assert itself on the global stage as every great power should. And it will be seeking to do so with the Chinese, with the Indians, and with others. And they also said that we don't have a problem with the West. We would like to work with the West. But if the West thinks that they are somehow the cultural superior, I mean, again, Burrell's We're the Garden. Russia's not buying that anymore. Russia's saying, the table no longer belongs to the West. The table belongs to everybody. The West is simply willing to have, the West can have a seat at the table if they want it. But if they don't want it, that's okay. The table will still exist. People will still move on because the West is not the center of the universe that it tries to portray itself as.
Really? That's sobering. What else you got, Ann? Just take your time, Ann.
Sorry about that.
Take your time. Just think about it. Do a little meditation.
I just did.
That's the same question, isn't it? From our friend Gosia Krasuek. Facebook. Coming in on Facebook. What is your position on Poland and the government, possible plan to join the war? Have you heard about the plan to create the Polish-Ukrainian Union, and what do you think about this nonsense?
Greetings from Scotland.
I'm sorry, I didn't finish it. Hello, Scotland. How are you?
Poland, and we know that they have some officials that are capable of saying some pretty stupid things. For instance, the Polish ambassador to France, who spoke about, Poland will be compelled to intervene if Russia wins the war. And there are some talks about, Polish-Ukrainian Union, especially with Western Ukraine and all this kind of stuff. But in order to implement any of this theory, you have to have reality. And the reality would mean that a Polish military capable of standing toe-to-toe with the Russians. Let me just make it as clear as I can. The Polish military is crap, just like the rest of NATO. The Polish military is incapable of sustained, meaningful offensive operations. They probably aren't that good at defending either. But the idea that this crap Polish military is going to be launching some bold thrust into Ukraine to overwhelm and defeat the Russian military, it's a dream. And understand that NATO knows this, meaning that NATO is not going to give any Article 4 coverage for Poland to move into Ukraine. And you have a lot of talk right now, EU, is saying we're going to send peacekeepers to Ukraine. No, you're not. No, you're not. First of all, peacekeepers. The key thing about peacekeepers is to keep the peace, both sides have to agree that they welcome the peacekeepers. That's how a Chapter 6 resolution of under peacekeeping in the United Nations work. All parties have to agree. If one party doesn't agree, you can't have a peacekeeping force, because as soon as it lands, it'll be at war with the party that didn't agree. And so if the European Union thinks that they're going to come in and insert themselves in any peace negotiation unilaterally, that's an invasion. Literally, it's called an invasion, and then you will all die because the Russians will kill you all. And again, I just don't understand what part of 80,000 Ukrainian losses in Bakhmut Europe doesn't understand. That's what happens when you fight the Russians. You all die. And so what Europe thinks that suddenly because the blood coming out of a body is Polish or French or German, that they're suddenly supermen, and the Ukrainian soldiers are 20 times better than anything NATO's got. NATO's a bunch of fat boys that have been eating sausages for too long, not training hard. And they're going to come in with equipment that doesn't work, and they're going to float in and expect to beat the Russians? It isn't going to happen. So it's all nonsense coming out of Poland right now. Literally nonsense. You have to deal with reality, and the reality is that Russia, together with Belarus, are very well positioned to crush anything Poland might do to take advantage of the deteriorating situation in Ukraine.
If you were to name the top 5 military organizations by nation, what would those 5 nations be? Top 5.
Top 5? Well, in total capacity, number 1 is America, United States of America. But, the problem is that changes when you talk about power projection. For instance, projecting, we're number 1 in terms of total capacity. I mean, we're global in outreach. There's no nation that matches us globally.
All right, who are the other 4? Who are the other 4?
Russia, China, Ukraine, I think, would come right after China. And you 4. Want the 5th one? Iran.
Okay. Just curious. You often talk about who sucks. I was just wondering who you think is strong. Okay. What else we got, Ann? Bonkers Beast. That's a good name. What's going to happen if Hungary and or Turkey drop their opposition to Finland joining NATO?
Turkey just dropped their opposition. The parliament has ratified it, and the Turkish president has agreed to it. So as soon as Hungary comes on board, then Finland becomes a member of NATO. What's going to happen? Finland becomes a member of NATO. The Russians have already said that it's a huge mistake, and that there will be consequences. And I already said Russia's building from scratch a 70,000 person 5-division corps in Karelia that's opposing them. They're putting nuclear weapons into Kaliningrad. They're going to put nuclear weapons up in the Kola Peninsula that targets Finland. They're going to make sure that Finland, feels as insecure as possible.
Okay. And you just meditate as long as you need. We'll just look at each other. There we go. Mohammed Dafa. Hi, Scott. Thanks for the show. Love from Indonesia. Do you have an opinion about France? And what's it? What are you laughing at?
Well, just because when you take France and AUKUS, you get fuck us. Okay. Which is perfect. AUKUS is Australia, United Kingdom, United States. It's this artificial 3-nation military alliance in the Pacific that's supposed to somehow stand up to China. It's built around the notion of it came because Australia had a class of submarines, the Collins class submarine, which is a diesel submarine, and they wanted to replace it with something. And France had been given the contract to build the replacement, which was going to again be a non-nuclear submarine. France was trying to convert a nuclear design into a conventional design. The prices was going through the roof, so the Australians pulled the plug on it. France got mad and they withdrew. That left Australia sort of in the lurch on the submarine thing, which the United States suck ass. So the United States stepped in together with the British, and we said that we were going to provide Australia with American nuclear submarines, and so they created this thing called AUKUS, which is supposed to be that. Now, the funny thing about it is, again, it's all centered on Australia. Why does Australia need blue water submarine? Because the Collins class was perfect for defending the waters of Australia, to defend that and defend the sea lines of communication as well. Diesel, quiet, good track record. But now you're going to get these nuclear subs to do what? You want to park them off the coast of China is what you want to do. Well, they're going to have 4. That's not much. And here's the news flash about Australia. they can only man 2 at a time. So even though they have 4, only 2 can go out because of the crew training, etc., like that. It's a joke. It's meaningless. But why are they doing this? To protect their strategic lines of communication. What's the most prominent strategic line of communication, sea line of communication with Australia? The one connecting it with China. Why? China's #1 trade partner. That's the strategic right there. That's it. So they're protecting their #1 strategic line of communication to China from China. It's a Monty Python skit, literally. It's just stupid. And now France is jumping in on the stupidity because they're concerned about China. The French army is shit. The French Navy is shit. I mean, this is just stupid. The British. Why are the British even there? This is Australia. What's Britain bringing into this? Nothing. This is America flexing, but at the end of the day, it's just a stupid, pathetic flex. This is, Jeff, don't get insulted, but this flex is equivalent of you flexing in front of the mirror trying to look like a sports guy, okay?
Feel free to use me for making your points.
You threw that one out there earlier. I'm just simply.
That's all right. That's all right.
You're allowed to make reference to about fat men if you want to talk about me. So.
Well, it was good to see you in Austin after all these years. You look great. Yeah. Do I look fabulous or what? Same kissable lips as always? What do you think?
Well, I don't know about the kissable lips. I'll leave that up to Olivia and all the other people out there. But you look great, Jeff. You haven't aged. I mean, God, we haven't seen each other in almost like 20 years.
I can't even remember what year it was. It's been a long time. But we're back. And whether it's in person or over the web, we're swinging. There's no stopping us. Let's see. Is that about? Well, why don't we do 1 or 2 more questions and call it a night. Johari, thanks for the donation. What are the chances that the so-called EU peacekeepers entering West Ukraine? Do you think the Russian will allow such force? Okay, I think we understand.
First of all, there will not be a peacekeeping force. There can't be a peacekeeping force unless Russia buys into it. So it's an EU invasion. And then they will all die because Russia will not allow such a force.
Somebody asked before, Ann took the question down, if the U.S. could pose a threat to Russia from Alaska. There it is.
I mean, no. No.
What was her name? Remember the former governor there said she understands how to deal with Russia?
Sarah Palin. You can see Russia over the right. I mean, we'd have to, from Alaska, if we rebuilt our Arctic warfare capability that we used to have there, in theory we could. But the problem is Russia's been building their Arctic warfare capability. They're, again, ahead of us in this game. They recognize the strategic importance of the Arctic, both in terms of safeguarding their strategic forces, which have a sort of a vulnerability that comes out of the I think it's the Barents Sea up there. No, Barents over here, North Sea. We send ships going across the northern part, and these ships have cruise missiles on them, and so the Russians feel vulnerable. So they're they're building up their capabilities to defend the Arctic, and it's just orders of echelon, magnitude greater than what we have. So right now, as things are configured, the United States poses no meaningful threat to Russia from Alaska.
By the way, here's the evidence right there. Look how thin I am.
And look how fat I am.
Well, yeah, I don't know why your wardrobe consultant doesn't like you wearing that shirt. That conceals.
The obesity.
All right. Thanks to Ann Moss for her great work backstage, except for the times it wasn't great work, but we'll talk. And thanks. What can I say?
Ann. Thank you, Ann, for everything. I appreciate all your work and everything you've done.
What he said. Thank you. Okay. And thanks to our beloved audience. And I would like to remind our beloved audience that we have Scott's book autographed available at scottrittermerch.com and the t-shirt.
Which I'll wear because my wardrobe consultant has said I would look good in that shirt.
All right. And you said extra large. Is that what you said?
Extra large.
All right. Sorry, I don't mean to make too big a deal out of that, but I want to make sure it's the correct size so it fits.
Well, and if we continue to eat the way we did on that trip, it will be an extra large.
It was good food.
That was some good food. I'd have to tell you about Austin, Texas.
Well, the other reason we have to return there is I'm going to be filing a lawsuit against Ryan for what he did to me with this wine container. The damages I'm looking at here, I would estimate at about $3 million so far.
$3 million? Okay.
I would estimate. My floor and table are stained, and also the emotional.
I saw the emotional thing.
Yeah.
PTSD.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I'll be consulting with my attorney. We'll be back on our usual schedule next week. Tuesday is the lightning round of Ask the Inspector. We call it the lightning round because Scott answers every question in 3 minutes or less. That's Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and then back at the usual time on Friday night for the loquacious version, the version you just heard tonight, at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Tomorrow we have our other podcast, Scenes from the Evolution, at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, so please join us for that. Absolutely no preparation for that, by the way, so that would probably be a disaster. But anyway, if you want to see a disaster, tune in. And Scott has something he wants to say. Take your time, Scott. Go ahead.
I'm going to say something, and Jeff knows that this is not an easy thing for me to say. It's not something I want to say, but we are getting ready to embark on some big projects, huge projects, but they don't fund themselves. And we have gone out of our way to make sure that everything we do is open to everybody, and we will continue to do so. But if you want these projects to happen, we need your help. And so if you've subscribed, keep subscribing. If you can donate. But movies don't make themselves, documentaries don't make themselves. And building the things that we're talking about building, they just don't build themselves. And Jeff is working with some very talented people to try and bring in stuff, but we need the audience's help too. So if you like this, if you like what you're seeing, if you like the writing, if you like what we're talking about doing, go to scottritterextra.com and donate. And Jeff knows that I don't like to make this speech, but it's a speech that needs to be made.
And more details will be forthcoming. And somebody asked if I'm going to Russia. No, I am not going on this trip. I'm going to stay here and connect with Scott while he's there and bring you bits and pieces of what's going on his trip. And
we will have a running diary, I guess, or whatever we want to call it. But the Substack will be the form, and maybe we might even find a way to do some Ask the Inspector from Russia. Who knows?
All right. Well, we'll be telling the story in more ways than one. So thanks a lot, everybody. ScottRitterExtra.com. That's the place for everything. We link to everything from there. And thank you so much. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Ann. And thank you, audience. See you all soon.
Thank you.